Good day everyone, and welcome to the GTAC Tech Talk webinar on Omnicast and Security Center Federation. My name is Derek. I'm a technical support representative with Genetec, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We also have other members of the Genetec Technical Assistance Center standing by to answer your questions during the webinar. Just type them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar console, and someone will get back to you shortly. Now, if there are any questions that we cannot answer in the time we have today, we'll be sure to send you an email with your answer. We'll also be posting the questions and answers from today's session in the Genetec Technical Assistance Portal forums under the GTAC Tech Talk section. If you have any comments or additional questions on the webinar or the GTAC Tech Talk webinar series in general, you can post those here as well. Also to be found on the GTAP are the videos from previous webinars. Just go to Tools, and then Videos, and then click on the GTAC Tech Talk section here. You can either watch a streamed video in your web browser by clicking on this icon here, or you can download a video in WMV format for viewing offline by clicking on the second icon right here. If you want to be kept up to date on the latest additions to the Genetec Technical Assistance Portal, you can log into the GTAP, go to the My Account section, and click on Email and Notifications. From the Notifications section, you can click on the boxes here for the subjects you're interested in, and select how often you'd like to be alerted of additions to those subjects. In order to be able to put a checkbox next to the subject, the frequency here will have to be set to daily or weekly. If you have it set to never, it's going to gray out the options below here. You can also edit your subscriptions to our 2 Genetec newsletters in the email subscription section above that. Now, if you've made any changes, don't forget to hit the Submit button down here, and that will save your selections. So let's take a look at the subjects we're going to be going over today. Before we get into Federation related to either one of the products, we'll go over what Federation is and why we'd be using Federation. After that, we'll take a look at Omnicast Federation, including the common setups, how video redirection works in an Omnicast Federation environment, how to configure the system for Federation, and some limitations. We're going to move on to the Security Center Federation, including how video is redirected, the configuration of the systems, and some limitations of Security Center Federation. So that's the core part of the webinar, which should take us around 35-40 minutes, and after that we'll take a little time to go over some of the most frequently asked questions we've had, and any troubleshooting steps related to those that might be helpful. That's probably going to take about 5 minutes there. So the first thing we want to look at today is what Federation is, and what it can do for you in both an Omnicast and Security Center context. Federation gives you the ability to link 2 completely independent Genetec systems together, giving an external set of users access to the resources of a particular system. There are 3 ways that we can combine systems in a federated environment. The first way is to federate an Omnicast system with another Omnicast system. This gives you the ability to view selected sites, sequences, cameras, and related entities of one Omnicast system to a separate external Omnicast system. The second combination is to federate an Omnicast system to a Security Center system. This will allow specified Security Center users to view cameras in the Omnicast system and link them to doors. The cameras that can be viewed will be limited to the ones accessible by the Omnicast user the Federation service is logging in with. The third combination is federation between Security Center systems. This will give users of one system the possibility to monitor and control entities on an external Security Center system. So now that we know how different systems can be federated, you might be asking yourself, why would we use Federation if you have multiple sites that are running the same application? Since the Genetec software supports nodal systems, we can have remote sites where a local failover directory is controlled by the directory failover coordinator, so the remote site can operate independently in case it is disconnected from the main site. With this in mind, let's take a look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of using federation versus remote sites. So one of the advantages is that the external sites are self-contained. The external site has no dependency on the directory service at the main site, so if the connection is lost, there's no effect on the operation of the external system at all. This is a good alternative to a failover system since there's no need to start or stop services. The brains of the operation will always be running at all the sites. If we have remote sites that have unstable connections to the primary site, it would be advisable to use federation as opposed to setting up a failover system. Another advantage is that there is no need to synchronize databases between the main site and the remote sites. Using a failover system, you'll need to keep the databases synchronized in order to avoid any configuration conflicts on the remote site. On larger systems where you have more than 1,000 entities, the synchronization process can take a fair bit of time and can consume a lot of bandwidth. If your remote site has an unstable connection to the main site, the synchronization process can run into problems as well. Ways around this involve clustering or complicated SQL scripts, so federation is a much simpler alternative. Now, if we look at the disadvantage side, the only real drawback of using federation is that you're losing the centralized configuration setup. So if you're using remote sites, you're only using one config tool to configure the entire system, since there's only one directory service running. With federation, you'll have to use a separate config tool on each independent system to make any configuration changes, since federation cannot push any configuration changes to a system that has been federated. Now that we've had a look at what federation is and what it can do, let's take a closer look at the specifics, starting with federation between Omnicast systems. Omnicast can only federate to other Omnicast systems which are on version 3.5 or higher. As of Omnicast 4.0, you can connect to the cameras, sites, inputs, sequences, and pretty much everything except speakers. When you're setting up your federation system, you can select what will be federated, so you can limit this to a subset of your cameras or other entities if you would like. We'll see more on that in a few minutes. There are two types of federated systems in Omnicast, simple and cross-federation. Taking a look at the simple scenario, this is where we have a main site that is connecting to one or more external systems. This is our most common scenario that we see in the field, and is usually used when we want to monitor multiple systems from one main site. We can have multiple levels of federation to accommodate for multiple sites. A federated entity cannot go to multiple directories, so we recommend only having one federation server per site. A good example of a simple federation setup would be a group of retail stores that are connected to the head office. Each store may only have a small number of cameras, but the head office would be able to monitor all the cameras or other entities at every store if they wanted to. If you want to share information between multiple sites, we would look at our next type of federated system using cross-federation. In this type of scenario, we would have a federation server on each site, which is getting information from the gateway at the other site. You would commonly see this at government or law enforcement sites, where they would need access to each other's entities and other information. Again, in this kind of scenario, we would only want to have one federation server per system. So before going into the setup for a federated directory, let's take a look on how video redirection works in a federated environment. There are 4 components we need to consider when looking at the path the video stream will take. We can take a quick look at a network path example using full unicast to see these 4 components. The video starts at our external system, where we have a federated gateway controlling the local entities and making the video stream available for the federation server. The Federation server is the next step in the path, and will always be redirecting video no matter what kind of network connection we have between the Federated gateway and the Federation server. After that, we have our gateway here at the main site, and our clients at the main site who are requesting the video stream from the Federated video units. Now in these scenarios, excuse me, we have a red bar for a multicast connection, and a red arrow indicating a multicast live video stream. And we have a green bar for a unicast connection, with a green arrow for a unicast video stream. In our example later on, we'll take a look at the recorded video stream as well, which is a blue arrow denoting a unicast TCP stream. So if we take a look at our possible live video redirection scenarios, we can see that even for the scenarios where we have multicast between the Federated gateway and the Federation server, the Federation server is still doing the video redirection. One important thing to note is that the multicast address on the main site will not be the same as the multicast address between the Federated gateway and the Federation server. So this one here will not be the same multicast address as the one that's coming in here. Part of the redirection process is to assign the stream a new multicast address for use at the main site here. So in the top scenario, we have a full multicast network. So we can see the multicast stream coming in from the external system, being redirected by the Federation service here, and being sent directly to the client who requested it. Since we have a full multicast connection between the Federation server and the client, we do not need to go through the gateway at the main site. In our second scenario here, we have multicast connections between the Federated gateway and the Federation server, but between the Federation server and the gateway, which may be on the same machine, we have a unicast connection to the clients. This may be where the clients are connected remotely to the main site, or if there's a network component that does not fully support multicast between the gateway and the client at the main site. In this case, the gateway would handle redirecting the video coming from the Federation server and send it to the clients in unicast. In our third scenario here, where we have a unicast gateway, the video stream is going over to the Federation server in multicast, but the connection between the Federation server and the gateway is in unicast. From there, the gateway is using the multicast connection to send the clients the stream out to multiple workstations. The fourth scenario is very similar, except we are sending the video stream to the clients in unicast, so the gateway must use a local multicast redirection loop, and that will basically replicate the stream, which will be sent to each client. Now, most commonly we would have a unicast connection between the Federated gateways and the Federation server, since most external sites are connected on a WAN or the Internet and do not support multicast connections between them. Since the video stream is always being redirected by the Federation server, the live video redirection scenarios are pretty much the same as we previously covered. Note again where we have a multicast loop to replicate the unicast video stream in order to send the video stream to multiple clients from the gateway. So if we take a quick look at a common example, we have a scenario where we have multicast locally, both at the main site and at the external site here, and we have a unicast connection between them. The video is being sent from the video units to the local clients and to the archiver at the same time. The Federated gateway at the external system will send the requested stream to the Federation server in unicast. The Federation server will redirect the video in multicast directly to the client, since we have a full multicast connection between the server and the client. Now, please note that the Federation server will assign the stream a new multicast address here at the network for the main site up here. So if we were requesting a recorded video from the archiver, It would take the same path to get to the client's archive player, starting from the server at the main site, which is running the directory, the gateway, and the archiver, and then it'll be redirected up to the client here. So if you need more information on video redirection at the main site or the external site, please refer to our previous GTAC Tech Talk webinar on Omnicast video redirection, which is available on the Genetec Technical Assistance portal. The next section we want to cover is how to actually install Federation on your server. Since the Federation service can take up a fair amount of resources, we recommend installing the Federation service on its own separate server. This way it will not interfere with the normal function of the directory, gateway, or archiver service running on the main server. When installing the Federation server, you'll need to do a custom install to select the right components. So before doing the installation, it's important to know the version of the Omnicast systems you will be connecting to. In other words, find out the versions of the directories you will be federating. You'll need to add the version or versions of the Omnicast Federation in the custom installation. If you need to add one later, you'll need to modify the install and add the new version to the list of features to be installed. So if we look at our case here, we're going to be connecting our Federation server to federated directories that are running Omnicast 4.4, 4.5, and 4.6. So you can see we have those actually selected, and those will be installed. If we want to add a system later on that's running Omnicast 4.2, we'll need to go back in here by modifying the install and make sure Federation 4.2 is selected right here, along with the other versions that we had in there previously. Now please note that the version of the Federation server should be equal to or higher than the version of any of the federated directories you'll be adding to the system. So for an example, an Omnicast 4.6 Federation server can connect to an Omnicast 4.5 federated directory, but it cannot connect to an Omnicast 4.6 federated directory. 4.7, excuse me. It would also be able to connect to an Omnicast 4.6 federated directory since they're on the same version. Now the software installation is pretty straightforward. You can check the Omnicast installation webinar if you need more information on that. So once the Federation server is up and running, we can go into the server admin to check a few of the properties of the Federation service. There's only one tab under the Federation service, the General tab. So the first thing we want to check is the gateway. Now remember that this is the service we are configuring at the main site, the one doing the viewing. So we want to put in the IP address or machine name of the server that's running the gateway at the main site. So as with other services, if the Federation service is running on the same server as the gateway, we can leave this field blank. So next we'll take a look at the network card to make sure it's the correct one on the system. And the video port here is the port we're using to receive data from the external systems. Now if there's a firewall on the network between the systems, you'll need to make sure the ports are opened in order to receive information properly. Please note as well that the incoming video is using a range. So this video port here is only the starting port. We'll need to open one port per video or audio stream. So make sure you have a wide enough range opened up in the firewall, and there's nothing else that would be using the ports in that range. So once we have the service configured and up and running, we need to look into adding federated directories. This is done in the config tool on the main site. From the drop-down menu, select the Federation Management view. From there you can see which federated directories you have added to your system. If you want to add one, click on the green plus on the bottom of the list, which is our Create button, and choose Federated Directory. So from the pop-up window, the first thing we need to choose is which Federation service this directory will be connecting to. After that, we choose the version, which is limited to the ones that you included when you installed the Omnicast software on the server. The gateway field does not refer to the local gateway on the main site, but the gateway on the external system that we wish to connect to. And the last option here is to have the entities synchronized. If you have the federated directory synchronized, the federated entities from that system will always follow the same name and hierarchy as the federated directory that they came from. Basically, if you have a camera in your config tool that is from another system, you won't be able to move or rename it if you have the synchronization option checked for the federated directory that that unit belongs to. The upside of this is that any changes that are made to the unit on the external system will be reflected at the main site as well. So after hitting the OK button and the federated directory has been added to your list, you can click on it and check the Properties tab on the right. The first thing you want to specify is the username and password for the account to use on the external system. We recommend setting up a separate user on the external system, which we'll take a further look into in a minute. You can either specify a normal Omnicast user, or you can enter an Active Directory user, including the domain in the username field. So for example, I could put Derek S at support to log in with the Derek S user on the support domain. The gateway should be populated based on the value entered when the federated directory was created. The software version is also set when the federated directory was created, but this cannot be changed after creation. If you need to change the software version, you'll have to delete the current federated directory and recreate it. The viewing quality option is important if you have bandwidth limitations between the sites. If you have stream selection enabled at the external site, you can choose which stream to use for viewing. This way you can set up a stream with a lower resolution or frame rate to reduce the amount of information that is being passed between the servers. The synchronized option is also reflecting what we had chosen when we created the federated directory. So below that, allow events on federated archivers will permit the events from the external system to be passed to the main system. This is good for setting up notifications based on events that may be happening at the external system, especially in a case where the external system may not be monitored locally. So as we mentioned, it's recommended to create a new user on the external system to be used by Federation to access the federated site. We should have one separate user per Federation service that will be connecting to the system. This user will be used to limit what can be selected as a federated entity on the external site. If we use the admin account, we'll have everything available to be selected as a federated entity, which is not desirable in most cases. One important thing to note is that the admin account can see any hidden sites, so if the Federation server is using the admin account, anyone viewing federated entities from the main site can see the hidden sites as well. The Entities tab of the federated directory will show what is available to be based on what the user that we used to log in with, and the one that's used for connecting to the federated directory. So basically, if we restrict the user that we're connecting with to only see one site, and only put a few cameras in that site, then the entities available for that federated directory will only be those cameras. One other thing to mention with respect to user privileges is that we need to make sure users at the main site have the rights to manage or view federated entities as well. Having the entities selected in the entities list will make it available to the system, but the user must still have the privileges to interact with federated entities if they want to do anything with them. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the Entities tab to see what options we have there. If we want to make the entity in the list available on the main site, we need to have it checked on the left here. If we have the Receive Events box checked for an entity, then we basically will be sent any events from that entity to the external system. Now, if we don't have the Synchronize option checked for the federated directory, we have the option to manually synchronize the units from here. This will reset all the names of the federated entities to reflect the names on the external system. If you want to federate or receive events from a group of entities, you can select them and then check the boxes next to the Synchronize button to federate entities or to receive events. Now, one last note on the entity selection is that we should be very selective here and only choose what we need. There are some limitations on the Federation service, so we want to make sure we're not using up bandwidth by passing unnecessary information. So speaking of which, let's take a look at the specific limitations of Federation in Omnicast. For the actual throughput of the Federation service, we have a limit of 150 megabits per second in and 150 megabits per second out. The limitation more applies to the throughput coming in, which may limit the number of federated camera entities that you can have. In order to accommodate more cameras, we can change the viewing stream used and modify the stream properties to send less data to the Federation service. Also, as we have mentioned, we can't push any configuration details for a federated entity from the Federation server to the external system. And as well as we previously mentioned, we cannot federate the speakers on a unit, which is due to the fact that we cannot push audio from the Federation server to the units. We can also receive we can receive audio from the mic or audio input attached to a unit, but we can't send anything to the audio output. One other important thing, we cannot federate in Omnicast our alarms. We cannot pass alarm information from an external system to the main system. Now, with regards to video playback on a federated camera, please note that there can only be a maximum of 20 simultaneous playback requests at a time. So one last limitation is that that if you're viewing a federated camera sequence from an external system, you will not be able to pause the sequence as you would a sequence that's on the main site. Now that we've had a look at how to federate multiple Omnicast systems, let's take a look at Security Center. There are two types of federation that we can do, either to an Omnicast system or to another Security Center system. When we federate an Omnicast system, we can bring the cameras into the Security Center system for live and recorded video viewing, and we can assign these to doors as well. This enables us to use the Security Desk client application to view video, so we don't need to have the live viewer and archive player running at the same time. You can also use the events coming in from the Omnicast system to perform actions on the Synergist system. So as opposed to an Omnicast to Omnicast federation, we can also receive alarms from the federated Omnicast system in Security Center. These can be triggered or acknowledged as you would in an Omnicast system. So when we have a federation scenario where we're integrating another Security Center system, the external system basically appears as if it's part of the Security Center system at the main site. You'll be able to fully monitor the entities from the federated system, as well as perform some controlling actions as well, such as locking and unlocking doors. Configuration of the entities on the federated system should still be done on the config tool application at the remote site. When we have a federated Security Center system, all the entities visible to the user are brought in and federated, so there's no entity selection as we saw with the federated directory in the Omnicast Federation. Now, there can be a problem with this import method in case we have Omnicast federated with Security Center as well. We need to make sure we do not federate the same Omnicast system twice, which can happen since we do not choose the entities to be federated. So if we take a look at an example here, we have our head office up here running Security Center. Below it we also have two sites, which are also running Security Center. And each one of these sites has an independent federated Omnicast system, and both of the Security Center sites are federated to the head office. So this works fine because the cameras from each independent system are visible to the Security Center system that they're federated to, and also visible to the head office through the Federation to the Security Center sites. Problems can happen in two ways in this scenario. The first problem can occur if someone at the head office decides they want to federate one of the Omnicast systems directly to the head office Security Center system. Since we cannot limit what's being brought in, the cameras from the Omnicast system will be connected to the head office system directly from its federation to the Omnicast system, this link here. The problem is that the same cameras will be brought in through the head office federation to the Security Center system here, which has federated the Omnicast system as well. So basically you're going to get the duplicate cameras coming in through both of these links here. Also, if we try to set up federation between the two Security Center sites, one of the sites will contain the cameras from both Omnicast systems. Since the head office has both of these Security Center systems federated, it will get the cameras from this Omnicast system twice. This can cause some pretty big headaches, so keep an eye out for this when setting up your Security Center and Omnicast federations. Now, when we're looking at video redirection, it worked quite a bit differently than in the Omnicast system. The Security Center integration service maintains the connection between the security desk and all external systems, including our federated Omnicast system. When a client on the security desk makes a request for video, it goes to the integration service here. The integration service tells the security desk which Omnicast gateway to connect to based on the camera requested, and the video is sent directly from the Omnicast system to the security desk client. The network connection type between the security desk client and the Omnicast gateway is purely dependent on your link between the two systems. So it can be in multicast, unicast UDP, or unicast TCP. Since we only have one Omnicast gateway that's being used for all the video traffic going to the Security Center system, you may want to set up a gateway that is used solely for federation in a large multi-gateway environment. This will keep the traffic down to a manageable level on the other gateways on the Omnicast system and not interfere with the normal operation of the Omnicast system. Alright, so the next logical step to take is to look at how we would set up the federation in Security Center. When installing your Security Center server, we need to make sure the integration service is installed and the service is running properly. This is used to manage the external systems we're connecting to. We recommend installing the Omnicast and Security Center servers on separate machines, but if you're installing them on the same server, we need to respect an installation order for everything to be installed and registered properly. The first step is to install your Omnicast server and your client software that's being used on that machine. And then you'll need to install the compatibility packs for the Omnicast versions that you'll be using. And the last step is to install the Security Center server software and the Security Center client applications if needed. In most cases, you'll not need to install both the Omnicast and Security Center client software, particularly the Live Viewer, as most of the functions of the Live Viewer and Archive Player are available in the Security Desk. Now, to add the federated system, either for an Omnicast or Security Center federation, you'll need to add an external system from the config tool. This can be done either in the network view by clicking on the Add an Entity button and choosing External System, or from any other view you can click on Add an Entity, choose the network view here, and click on External System. From the new External System window, you'll first need to choose the integration service to be used. Just select it right there. You click on that button, it'll actually bring up a search list that you can choose the server from. You'll then need to identify what type of external system you're integrating, either Omnicast or Security Center Federation. These two options right here. The other two types of external systems, the Active Directory and AutoView LPR Manager, they're not being used for federation. We're going to take a look at the specific information for adding an Omnicast system, but the information required for a Security Center system is very similar. So the first thing to specify is the name or IP address of the directory that we can connect to right here. For an Omnicast system, this should actually be the gateway that we're using to connect to the Omnicast directory. On smaller systems where everything is installed on one machine, this will be the same IP address, but on a larger system where we may be using a separate gateway for federation, we'll want to put the address of that server in the directory field as the one doing the communication between the Omnicast directory and the Security Center server. The username and password is to specify which user on the external system will be used by Federation to gain access to the external system. We can use Active Directory credentials here, as we saw with the Omnicast system. And as mentioned in the Omnicast section, it'd be a good idea to create a user specifically for this purpose in order to restrict what is accessible by the Federation server. If you're creating an Omnicast Federation external system, you'll have to choose the version of the Omnicast system that you're adding here. The versions that are available in the drop-down box are limited to the compatibility packs that have been installed. So if you're missing a version in there, make sure you've installed the required compatibility pack for that version of Omnicast. These must be installed on the server that is hosting the integration service. So below that we have a list of the Omnicast events that can be sent over from the Federated Omnicast system to the Security Center server. You can check the ones you wish to use, or use the Check All or Check None buttons on the bottom of the list. This way we can use the federated actions coming in from Omnicast to trigger events in the Security Center system. So for example, you could have the motion on event from a camera in the Omnicast system trigger the door unlocking action in the Security Center system. So once we have the external system set up, we can take a look at the properties to check the status of the system. We can use this to make sure we have a good connection to the Omnicast Federation. We can also use this tab to make any changes required to the list of available Federated Omnicast events or other properties of the external system. If the Omnicast system is upgraded or there's a change to the gateway being used, you can make any changes from here without having to recreate the Omnicast system. If you take a look at the bottom of the Properties tab, there's a Reset Connection button in case you need to resync with the Omnicast system. And this would be a good first step to try in case any changes to the Omnicast system are not showing up in the Security Center system. Also down there is a link right here to view diagnostic information, which can provide helpful information on any problems you're having connecting to the external system. So once you have your Omnicast Federation showing up in your logical view, you can start doing things like associating cameras with doors. If you click on a door, you'll now be able to see the camera tab on the right here. You can add cameras to either side of the door, and this will link the camera's video streams to all events from that door. You can use the green Create button on the bottom to add a camera. If the camera being added is a PTZ dome, you can also choose a PTZ preset to go to for any events as well. So there's a few requirements and limitations to bear in mind when using Security Center Federation. In order to be able to view video using the Security Desk client application, we must have 3D acceleration supported and active on the video card. If you can see video through the widget on the bottom of the screen here, but not in the tile, then 3D acceleration is most likely not supported or not enabled. This is quite common for servers which are usually built for processing power and not for video display. When talking about how many systems the integration service can handle, it can be up to 100 Omnicast external systems using 3 integration services, which is approximately 33 systems per integration service. This accounts for an average of 150 cameras per system, or around 15,000 cameras total, depending on the strength of the server, of course. However, when we're talking about integrating Security Center systems, a single integration service can handle approximately 100 Security Center systems. We can have up to 5 integration services, which can go up to a total of approximately 500 external security center systems. Now once again, this is dependent on the power of the system running the integration service as well. We have a brief outline of the service specs that are required as a minimum for federating an Omnicast system, and that's provided right here. When talking about the user privileges, we want to make sure we do most of the restricting at the main security center system, and have the user privileges more open on the external Omnicast system. The privileges that can be granted or denied on federated entities are fairly extensive, and we don't want to run into a situation where something is allowed at the main site but blocked at the federated site. So now that we've seen our setup and configuration and everything, we're going to go through a few troubleshooting and frequently asked questions. So our first frequently asked question, when I'm trying to add a federated directory to my system, the OK button is grayed out. Why can't I add a federated directory? Now usually this indicates a problem with the federation service. So you can check in the drop-down menu if the federation service you are trying to use is written in black or red, or if there's no service there, you may have to modify your install to add the federation service to your server. As you can see in this case, we don't actually have it installed. Our second question, why can't I pick the version of the directory I'm trying to federate? It's not in the list. So in this case, we'd say we'd try to federate a 4.5 version. So when the software was installed, you may not have added this version to the federation. The only ones that will show up on the list are the ones that have been installed. So you can go back and modify the installation and add the versions you wish to use. So in our example, we'd want to add our federation 4.5, and then it would show up in the list. Our third most frequently asked question, why is the Synchronize button missing in the Entities tab? So if you remember from a previous tile, we had the Synchronize button down here, and that's in our Entities section. And in this example, you can see it's missing. So if you check your properties, you should see that the Synchronized option was checked when the federated directory was added. So we can see right down here. This will automatically keep the entities synchronized, so no manual sync is required. On to our fourth question. When I'm trying to add an Omnicast federation as an external system, I can't see the version of Omnicast I wish to use. So again, let's say we're trying to add our Omnicast 4.5 system. We don't have it listed here in the drop-down. For a version of Omnicast to be selectable as an external system, the server that's running the integration service must have the compatibility pack installed for that version of Omnicast. This is something you'd want to plan out ahead of time, as it's better to install the compatibility packs before the Security Center installation. When you run your Security Center install, you can actually see that we've provided a link here to the available compatibility packs. Our fifth question, why can't I move or rename my federated cameras or sites? So in here I have a federated camera, I right-clicked on it, I'm trying to rename, but I can't do anything to it here. So you probably have the federated directory synchronized, so it's going to take the hierarchy and names from the Omnicast server and not allow configuration at the main site. So again, here we can see that the site that we had federated is actually synchronized. So on to our sixth question. I have an Omnicast 4.0 system that I'd like to federate to Security Center, but Security Center only supports the federation back to version 4.2. Is there anything I can do in this case? Now there is a workaround for this. Since Security Center imports all entities from the remote system and any systems attached to that system, you can do an Omnicast to Omnicast federation to see the entities. So in our example, if we have our Omnicast 4.0 system federated to an Omnicast 4.2 system, and then federate that 4.2 system to our Security Center, the entities from both these systems will show up at our Security Center system here. Now our last question, can I view as many streams in the security desk as in the live viewer? Now the live viewer does actually have the capacity to view more streams, basically due to the increased overhead on the security desk application. In most cases, both can handle as many cameras as we'd need to view, so this really shouldn't be an issue very often. So this concludes the webinar for today. We're going to keep the session open for about another 10 minutes or so in case you have any further questions. If you think of any afterwards, you can always post them on the GTAP forums. As well, the questions and answers from today's webinar will be posted on the forum in a few days. Any comments, feedback, or suggestions you would like to leave for the GTAC Tech Talk webinar series are always appreciated. On behalf of myself and the Genetec Technical Assistance Center, I'd like to thank you very much for attending today's webinar and hope you have a very good day.